Welcome to Inquiring Minds. I'm Steve Harper, and with me, as always, is my amazing co-host, Donna Carlin. Donna, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I am fantastic. I've been looking forward to this conversation for quite some time, and I'm excited to dive into this topic. So, what is our conversation, slash question for today?
You know, the word disagreement has a really negative connotation. My question is, how do you turn a disagreement into a conversation
Ooh,
of diverging viewpoints?
I love that. Oh, yeah, this will be an interesting one because I think that's not a natural. It's not a natural attitude when a disagreement comes up, right? I think everybody tends to dig in and want to argue their points and their perspectives, and so this is a really helpful conversation because I think it will give people a different approach the next time a disagreement occurs. So, I'm curious to, tell me a little bit about, why this bubbled up, and have you been in this experience where, you've had to coach and counsel a client, to look at this disagreement not as an argument, but as an opportunity?
Oh, yeah. Even to the point where when a team was really struggling and everybody needed to be right and their viewpoint was the only viewpoint and that kind of thing, I literally got them all into a room and I made them switch positions so that the one that was arguing for A needed to argue B on behalf of the other people and vice versa. And they got
Brilliant.
so into it, they switched places and then they started arguing about that. And I just started laughing. I said, you walked in, this group was struggling because they absolutely said A is the only way. And the other group said B is the only way. Now that you switched places and had to take the role of the opposite side, so to speak, now you're arguing for the opposite side. What is that telling you?
Yeah,
So we went into the fact that it wasn't that it's absolute. Nothing is absolute.
true.
Everybody has a different set of life experiences and knowledge and viewpoints, that are unique to themselves and what they've experienced in the past. If you're open to listening to why they came up with that solution or whatever, then you could have that agree to disagree or come to the other side or co-create something brand new between the two of you.
Yep.
It's how open you are to listening and how stubborn you are to have to be right. Because when they switched roles, I started laughing and they looked at me, like, what are you laughing about? Because they were so hot. I said, you've totally switched places and now you're arguing for your protagonist's point of view. Give me a break. Like, what are you arguing about? It means you see their point of view. Now let's sit down and figure out how to move forward as a
Yeah.
collective. So there you go.
Where do you think that I'm curious in your perspective. Where do you think the natural tendency comes up to argue anything, whether it's where we go to dinner, what movie we see, how we tackle a project? There seems to be this deep-seated, almost natural tendency for people to dig in and try and prove that they have a better thought process or a better idea or a better perspective, almost as if it's a God-given right that you have to do it right in every situation. So and I know you and I've worked with a lot of different corporate teams, and you see it, and you can kind of take that step back and go, you guys are arguing for no realistic reason, but it's almost as if they feel like they're compelled to do it. And so where do you think that comes from for most individuals?
I think that's a huge question that has multiple answers. And, with some people, it's comfort zone. I
Yeah.
don't want to go to this other restaurant because it's that trying a new kind of food won't be comfortable. What if I don't like it? They start pre-acting. What
Yeah,
if I don't
yeah.
like it? Then I spent money for nothing, and then I won't enjoy the evening. And they just work themselves up like crazy. Um, for some people, it's expectations. I'm expected to do something to a certain level of quality or whatever else. If it's something brand new, I'm in uncharted waters. So therefore, I'm putting myself at risk.
Mm-hmm.
Doing what's tried and true, there's no risk involved, well, little risk involved, as
Right.
opposed to diving into something. If you manage expectations at the front end and say, hey, let's just give it a shot and see where it comes. And if it bombs, it bombs, and everybody's in, agreement with that, and nobody's at risk for failing, so to speak, then it's a different story. So how it's set up, what are the managed expectations, and what don't you know that you need to know, so that you're approaching things from curiosity, not judgment.
Sure. Well, and I go back to one of our earlier episodes. We talked about the stories in our head, right? The things that we tell ourselves about certain circumstances, and we arm ourselves with these stories, which is almost like preparing for battle. Which is why I think that there's this interesting dynamic about why do we argue when there really isn't any reason to argue, even on the most simplistic things like going to dinner or what movie to watch. Why do we feel like we have to take a side or take a position that may be counter to someone else's, just because to a certain degree it becomes almost a habit that is hard to break for a lot of people, that they disagree for just the sake of disagreeing. And so it's pretty fascinating, I think, because especially if you're finding that you run yourself into these situations in your personal life, you're probably that much more difficult to work with or collaborate with in your work environments.
Sometimes you just feel as if you want to be in control of something. So the stubbornness and the choice is, I haven't had control over what restaurant we went to last week,
Yeah.
the movie that, my spouse chose for us to go to, the radio station that's being played, any of that. And you have it up to here because everything is vetoed. And it gets to the point where you just want to make a decision, and you're really stubborn about how something's going to be executed, or what the choice is going to be, or whatever, because you just are sick and tired of being overruled, so to speak. There's so many different answers to this question.
Sure.
I always look at, what is the question we could ask to get people back in curiosity.
Yeah.
So instead of saying, no, you're wrong, to be absolutely genuinely curious, how in the world did you come up with that? Like, take me through it so I understand. Help me understand. Then we'll put our heads together to figure it out collectively.
Yeah.
Maybe take a little bit of both and create something new. If you approach things from curiosity and a perspective of learning, it's not about being right or wrong. And you might be right in the long run if you share how you came to your conclusion with the other individual, if they're open to it. It's learning something new, saying to yourself, whoa, I never even thought of that. And what if I applied something like that to other situations? Is a wonderful way to operate.
Yeah, it is. And in real life, that seems like, I mean, that is utopia. If you could, if you could catch yourself before you open your mouth or you engage the brain to actually start coming up with your argument, to say, whoa, wait a second. What can I learn about this situation? Where can I drive from a point of curiosity to engage this other person? To the whole point of the topic, right? Is how do I get them to have a conversation as opposed to an argument or a disagreement? And it does require some self-control. And maybe instead of going to the sixth gear on the old mind engine, you're kind of holding in neutral for a little bit, just a little bit, to overcome that natural tendency to immediately want to get into a disagreement.
One of the most important parts of my work, and I'm really analyzing it now that I'm back teaching, is to say, what is the question you need to ask yourself right now? And we had that conversation
Yep.
in one of the previous shows. That is probably the skill set that is the most valuable for anybody I'm working with. So instead of coming up with the questions, which coaches are known for,
Yep.
asking the pointed laser questions, whatever you want to call it, how do I help them see how they're thinking? And when they're about to dive in, what is the question they need to ask themselves right now? So it really gives them that break, that pause.
Yep.
I spoke about Carlos Santana in a previous show, pressing the pause button to really reflect on
Yeah.
what you really need to see. Um, that stays in my mind. So what do they need to reflect on rather than make a judgment on is one question. What is the question you need to ask yourself right now? And it's really understanding that we tend to dive in, like you said. What is the utopia when you're able to just stop yourself from diving in
Yeah.
and sharing your 3 cents? It really creates an entirely different atmosphere when you could turn around and say, oh, okay, one sec. Help me see what you're seeing so that I understand it. So what that does is create connection with the other
Yeah.
individual, opens you up to learning or viewing something from a different perspective, and being known to be collaborative.
Yep.
There's nothing better than that. Even if it's at home where, your spouse says to you, where do you want to go for dinner? And you say, I want to go for Italian food. And then, like, whatever you want, right? Whatever you want is fine with me. Okay, I'd like to go for Italian. No, I'm not really in the mood for Italian. Well, you want to kill them at that point, right? And if you say, okay, what are you in the mood for? Oh, whatever you want. Well, that's going to start an argument.
Yes. Yeah.
The question is there anything that you're really not in the mood for so that we could eliminate that and look at what's left over?
Yeah.
And that shows that you care enough to engage, the person's wants, needs, what they want in the moment. It's recognizing that your viewpoint is not the only viewpoint.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, to a certain degree, it's learning to disagree without being disagreeable, right? And when you try and find an avenue to engage the other person, and we all know it. In fact, you could see the train coming down the tracks. Like you just did that whole dinner scenario, and I'm repeating in my head 3 or 4 times that's happened this month, right? I don't care, but then you put an offer on the table like this is something I'd like, and that I'm not really into that. Well, you do care, obviously, and then you're ready for battle, right? So it's interesting because I think if you can see those situations coming down the tracks, and you can see how to avoid them, and you can get yourself with the mindset that you're not going to fall into the same old traps that these habits tend to force us to situations these habits force us to encounter. We become far better at communicating and engaging with the other person, which is really what you want to do anyway, right? Like we said,
That's
when we
right.
don't agree, we want to be able to get to a point where we can have a conversation about it. And like you said, being able to ask these questions in a way that allows you to, still be in curiosity and, for something as interesting as dinner where you might not think about that, there is actually. So, what's the motivation on a Tuesday evening, about why, Chinese food doesn't work for, for dinner for your spouse or your significant other, I look at it from the perspective, especially in those close tied relationships, which we tend to have both personally and professionally, right? We fall into these habits where we stop looking and exploring and understanding who that other person is because we're not asking ourselves the questions that we need to be sort of exploring and understanding about the other person. And so you start to look at a bigger, brighter picture of someone when you can engage the brain before you engage your mouth to start a disagreement, to, like you said, dive into a sense of curiosity about, what else do I need to know about this person, and how can I better further our communications so that we don't end up in an argument or exactly in dispute.
One of the greatest things that happens is when you say to a person, have you experienced something like this before? What happened? And you find out not only a situation where there's a reason why this person doesn't want to go off on, the right path, but they want to go left because when they went on the right, they got hit over the head with a 2x4 kind of thing. You hear about them. You hear about their past experience. You hear them recanting a story or relating a story, sorry, that gives you such insight into who they are and what their past history was.
Yeah.
It's fabulous. It's a great way to literally learn more about an individual just by the stories that they tell. So when you ask them, where have you experienced this before, if at all, or something similar, What happened? And if you could have made a different choice, would you make that different choice now? So
Yep.
or would you have even considered what I brought to the table? And if not, why didn't you consider it? That's another thing. If you knew about, what I just suggested and you didn't consider it, what was the reason behind why you didn't consider it? That'll teach me a lot as well,
Yeah.
right? And so it's a fascinating dance, right, with other human beings and choices and everything else.
It is, and I think the interesting thing, you have these close knit relationships that we tend to fall into this habit, right? That we stop exploring, we stop learning, and this is, for those leaders that are out there, this is a perfect training ground for you to get good in your personal life, with those close tie friendships, those family members, your significant other. Doing this on an ongoing, consistent basis will arm you and you'll be that much better when you're out there in your professional life, when you're exploring, how to engage your team or your direct reports or a potential prospect or a client. When you get good at doing this at home, you become those skills become naturally more comfortable for you to apply out there in the business world. It's an investment in your skill set, on a personal level, but it can be magnified by the, exponential return on your professional, in your professional life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, this, we could probably talk about this for a long time, but this has been a really fun, interesting topic. We are certainly curious about what your take is on this, and is this something as watching this on video with us or catching this on the podcast. If this is something that you're willing to maybe give a try, right? Do some of these things that Donna's suggesting with your, with some of the people that you would often find yourself in disagreement with. Can you convert that into a conversation? Can you actually apply the curiosity aspect and see if you can dig in a little bit more and see what those motivations and that drive is? And we'd love to hear from you. So Donna, how could people share their experience, their opinion, your thoughts on this episode, or maybe some of the things that they're out there trying with their, either in their personal lives or their professional lives?
Let us know on our Facebook group, Inquiring Minds with Donna Carlin and Steve Harper. Join the conversation and tell us if you'd like us to have a discussion on a topic of your choice and why. It would be great to hear. You could reach us at our websites and email us through there. It's Steve is at ripplecentral.com. I'm at donnacarlin.com. You'll be able to find our contact information, all of our social media stuff. And, we would really love to hear from you. We're getting some really good responses and, people telling us that they've listened to one of the last episodes and that it was really great. A friend of ours just did that the other day. It
Yep.
was great to hear his perspective. So
Yep.
contact us. Let us know what you think.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Donna, this has been another insightful conversation. Certainly hope that people will go out and apply some of what they've heard and learned today. And, I can't wait for our next topic. So I will look forward to visiting with you again very soon.
Have a good one.
You too.